Chet Galungan with the Countdown City Geeks Media Team here in San Antonio. And we got a fantastic panel for you guys. My next guest, well, he goes all the way back to Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, where he played the somewhat clumsy Gungan known as Jar Jar Binks. He is an accomplished voice actor with over 30 voice acting credits to his name. You might also know him by his Jedi name, Kelleran Beq. Anybody? Make some noise for the savior of Grogu, Ahmed! Oh yeah, keep it going!
Thank you, love you back.
How are you, sir?
It's good. It's not the first time I've been referred to as the savior.
Really?
Yeah.
We're talking about Star Wars or something different?
Oh no, that's for the other con that I'm doing next week.
Welcome. We are so glad you're here, man.
Thank you. It's really great to be here. You guys have been fantastic. It's such a wonderful town, San Antonio. I haven't been here in a long time. It's really great to be back.
And we were just talking backstage. He was lucky enough to try some good old Texas barbecue.
Oh my gosh. It's probably the best brisket I've ever had in San Antonio. I know people from Memphis are upset at me when I say that. It's true.
They ain't got nothing on Texas.
Yeah, you know, Texas barbecue.
Well, like I mentioned, we're so glad you're here. We have a lot to talk about because there's just been some, over the last few years, some momentous events that you were just so lucky to be part of and we were so lucky enough to witness. Mm-hmm. So let's go ahead and start at the top.
Okay.
Kelleran Beq. Fans were wondering, since we were introduced to Grogu, aka Baby Yoda, I don't care what you say, I'm still gonna call him that. Where on Coruscant did he come from? Talk to us about that first conversation with Favreau and Filoni. How did they present this idea to you that you were gonna save Grogu?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of floating around that Grogu got saved by someone.
Right.
And nobody really knew who it was or who it was going to be. And so even I was, because I love the Mandoverse, but I was just like, where did this kid come from? Like, what was his backstory? And I really loved the fact that they start Grogu's journey like at 50 years old, right? So he has this whole wonderful backstory that they were slowly revealing. And then I get a call on my phone and I was like, Dave Filoni, do I owe him money or something? Like, why is he calling me? And so he was like, we want you to come in and, John and I want to talk to you. And I went to their office and, we had lunch and we were talking. And they were like, well, do you want to come back and be in The Mandalorian? And I was like, I don't know. I really don't know.
And they didn't specify in what way at that time?
Yes, they told me I was going to save Grogu. But they didn't tell me like how, right?
So you weren't automatically like Jar Jar Binks might save Grogu?
It was up in the air. Like for me, for them they knew. But for me, I was just like, how do they want me to come back, right? And Star Wars takes up your life, like there's just so much you have to think about now when you're doing Star Wars, especially since, back in the Phantom Menace days, it was just George.
Yeah.
And so everything just began and ended with George. If George thought it was a good idea, we did it. If he didn't think it was a good idea, we didn't do it. Mm-hmm. But now with Disney, there's a lot of people that you have to talk to. And Dave and John really kind of made it feel like home, because they're both in their own rights wonderful filmmakers and great storytellers. And it kind of felt like being back in the prequels. And, when I gave them my trepidations about coming back, they were both like, we're going to make sure that you're safe. We're going to make sure that you're protected. And then I was like, yeah, okay. we'll do it. And then we really collaborated on how this thing was going to happen. They were wonderful, yeah. Dave, John, Rick Famuyiwa as well. I mean, the three of them were just such an integral part in how this was happening, and they were so very open with me because they knew I was a director, they knew I was a filmmaker, and they were just like, and a writer, and they were just like, well, what do you think? And so we kind of collaborated on the whole thing.
What an all-star team right there.
Yeah, it was pretty great. I just really love them. And then I get to set and I put the robes on and I was like, it's about time. And,
we feel that way too, right?
But what's really exciting is when Carl Weathers came in, he directed the episode.
Oh my God.
Carl Weathers was just like, he was, a kid growing up, Apollo Creed was the guy. You know what I'm saying? And so as soon as he walks on, I was like, don't call him Apollo Creed, don't call him Apollo Creed, don't call him Apollo Creed. I was trying to be cool, but I couldn't help it, man. And he was just a fountain of knowledge and information. And we didn't stop talking, and we stayed friends. It's past Mandalorian, and when he passed, it was really impactful. He was just like just a wonderful big brother with a whole, the kindness and the generosity and the wealth of knowledge was invaluable. I was honored. I'm honored to be there.
Woo! He was incredible on the show. It was wonderful to see him in this galaxy, playing with everything and interacting with all these characters. It was just wonderful to see him in that light. Talk to us about building this character. Now, we know this character because he was part of this Jedi Temple challenge. But what else did you want to bring to the table, or what else did you and Dave and Favreau talk about on how to kind of build his motivations as a character and make sure that you guys just nailed this rescue scene, which, might I add, I always appreciate seeing different aspects of Order 66. Like, even though we got it in Revenge, we've seen it multiple times. We've seen it in some animated projects, and it's always just so fulfilling as a fan to see like how others were impacted, because it was like a galaxy-wide event. And so, always seeing like another point of view of it is always just incredible.
Each side quest in Star Wars leads you to a new main character where you can just go on a journey with them. And Kelleran Beq, for me, Kelleran was a character I created for Jedi Temple Challenge, which I loved because secretly I always wanted to be a game show host. And when Lucasfilm Kids was just like, hey, do you want to do a game show? I was like, yes. And they were just like, well, you get to make, your Jedi character. And the sabered hand was this nickname that I always had if I ever had a Jedi character, right? So Kelleran Beq, I really love etymologies of words and names. And I wanted Kelleran to connect to the character that I cameoed in Attack of the Clones, right? Which was Ahmed Beq, right? And so I wanted to make a connection between Ahmed Beq and this new Jedi. And I liked the name Kelleran because it felt to me like Kylo Ren was a derivation of Kelleran. And I wanted to kind of solidify the Kylo Ren name in some kind of a lineage, right? So it just doesn't come from anywhere.
Right.
So Kylo Ren begins at Kelleran. Kelleran eventually becomes Kylo Ren, which is like how William is from Wilhelm, right?
Right.
And so that's where the name Kelleran Beq came from. But what was really important to me was that Kelleran Beq is a teacher. And in Jedi Temple Challenge, my goal was to bring these Padawans through their training to get their lightsabers and actually become Jedis to begin their Jedi journey.
Right.
And we've had a lot of reluctant teachers in Star Wars. Like, Ben Kenobi doesn't really want to teach Anakin, and Yoda doesn't really want to teach Luke, and Yoda and Mace Windu are total haters when it comes to Anakin. They're just like, don't do it, right? But I wanted Kelleran Beq to actually want to be a teacher, like be psyched to be a teacher.
I love that.
And, regardless of how good he is as a knight, regardless of how good he is and how connected he is with the Force, I wanted it to be important that he really wants to teach these kids. Like, it's his choice to be there, and he wasn't like relegated to the Jedi Temple because he wasn't, a badass fighter. So, I teach at the University of Southern California, and I teach at Stanford University. And I think being a teacher is probably the most important profession that we have. And
where my teachers at? Yeah.
And with Kelleran, I wanted teachers to have a superhero. I wanted teachers to be able to see somebody and go, that guy is a teacher and he cares about the kids, and that's the goal, that's the calling. So when I expressed all of that to Dave and John, they were just like, this is why he has to save Grogu. Because if anyone is going to save a youngling, it's going to be their favorite teacher.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Right? I'm curious, what was your reaction to all the internet conjuring up this villainous alter ego known as Darth Jar Jar?
Yeah, that was interesting. Like, when it first came out, I was just like, wow, this guy has a lot of time on his hands and a lot of time on Reddit. Like, wrote a dissertation on Reddit. I was like, I just look for restaurant recommendations on Reddit, and this dude is writing dissertations. But what was cool was, like, he actually saw some of the things that I did that kind of floated under the radar, right? Which is why I was like, okay, that was pretty good. Like, I always say that Jar Jar was a mixture of Buster Keaton and Jackie Chan. Buster Keaton was more George, and Jackie Chan was me. Like, I grew up watching Jackie Chan movies, and I love Jackie Chan. And as far as comedic timing goes, I think there's nobody better than Jackie Chan, especially when you're talking about like martial arts and stuff. The guy was the first person in martial arts to make a hit look like it hurt. Even when he like hit somebody, he would always hit somebody and go like, ha, right?
You're right.
That guy had and I always loved that. I loved how he put all that personality into it. And one of my most formative Jackie Chan movies was Drunken Master and Drunken Master 2, right? So with Jar Jar, I did a lot of like drunken kung fu because I'm a martial artist. I grew up a martial artist.
I'm sorry. 4th degree black belt.
Yeah, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
We gotta get that out there.
I'm only a black belt in karate. My father was my first sensei, which is like, if we really want to have a therapy session up here, we can talk about that. But
we have time.
My father studied karate in Okinawa and then brought it home, and everything was karate. Like, I could not make my bed without like karate. And it wasn't the nice karate like Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off. It was like, make up your bed or put on your gi. You were fighting. So, because of that, because I grew up in martial arts and, Bruce Lee and the Shaw Brothers and Jackie Chan, that was my shit. So when I was making Jar Jar and making the walk and all the stuff like that, I was just like, well, I gotta throw some like drunken style kung fu in here. And I did a lot of like drunken, techniques, especially in that end fight scene with all the boomers and all that stuff. That was pretty much all, from me it was Jackie Chan, but from George it was like Buster Keaton movies. So he saw that guy on the Reddit, he was like, oh, that's like drunken kung fu. And I was like, yeah, it actually is drunken kung fu, And he was like, and that's why Jar Jar is the Sith Lord. And then And then there was a bunch of things that I was doing like behind the scenes to kind of mimic the Jedis, right? So you guys remember the movie Ghostbusters, right? So in Ghostbusters, Rick Moranis, when he becomes the Keymaster, like he's all crazy, right?
Right.
Rick Moranis, when he's in the firehouse and the Ghostbusters are having that argument, Rick Moranis is like behind everybody, like kind of copying them physically, you know? And I always loved that since Ghostbusters came out. And so when the Jedis did something, I would do that, right? So like when it was like waving hands and stuff, I would be like, does this, why are they doing this? Does this thing work? Because Gungans don't really know. They're not really impressed with Jedis.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They're just like, oh, big deal, you know? You know, Jar Jar was like maxi big the Force, right? So he was never impressed. So I was just like, what is this? Why do you keep doing that? Why are you saying? And so I started doing that, and this guy picked up on that too. Like he was just like, well, if you watch Jar Jar's hands, he's doing like force controls and stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm just mimicking the Jedis. But I was just so surprised. And a lot of the animators just copied what I did on set. So they didn't realize that what I was doing was a thing. They were just like, they were so stressed out that they were just like, whatever he does, just freaking do it. And then George was just like, if you don't do what Ahmed does, this is not gonna be the movie. And so they had to animate everything I did. And so I walked through ILM one time, like during post-production.
Oops.
And this animator looked at me and he was just like, I've been working on your arm for 3 months. One arm, 3 months. And I was like, I'm sorry. But all of that translated through the animation. And it showed up in the movie. And then it was enough for this guy to go, Sith Lord. So I just kind of went on with it. And then there's this like scene that got cut. I had a scene in Revenge of the Sith that got cut and it was just me and Palpatine.
Oh.
And it's never seen the light of day, but that would have definitely solidified it.
Come on, you're not gonna tell us anything.
No, I'm not saying it. I'm just putting that out there.
Hold on. Everybody put your phones away right now.
Yeah, it was cut, but it was pretty formative.
It was, I'm not gonna, if you don't want to say it's fine, but it was just a conversation between the two of them.
Yeah. It's just me and Palpatine on a nice little stroll.
I'm not gonna sleep the rest of the week without thinking about what it could be now. This is torture. It's not nice.
Sorry.
It's all right. But I do love.
It happened.
I love that. I'm a diehard Ghostbuster fan. I dress up as a Ghostbuster with my charity team, and we do events all over the city and raise money for good causes. So the fact that there's a Louise Tully reference on this stage makes me so happy. Thank you for doing that.
You know what I've always wanted, and you know they do all of these remakes of Ghostbusters.
Yes.
I just want to be in one Ghostbuster remake and say one line.
Really?
Yes. I want to be in every remake of Ghostbusters and say this one line. The walls in the 53rd precinct were bleeding. All I want to say. And then disappear. Because that guy, nobody ever references that line. Like they're in the mayor's office and everybody's, we got the traffic and the roads and they're explaining everything. And then this guy comes out with the James Earl Jones voice. The walls in the 53rd precinct were bleeding. And just the most dramatic line in Ghostbusters. And I love it. So I want to do that line.
Yeah! We'll get a hashtag going.
Explain that.
Ahmed for Ghostbusters. I love it. This is a great segue into Darth Jar Jar because you got to play him. Yeah. He is now canon,
kinda
adjacent canon, but how fulfilling was it to bring Darth Jar Jar to life in the Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy project?
Rebuild the Galaxy. It was great. I'm a comic book nerd, and I grew up on Marvel Comics, right? And one of my favorite set of comic books was like the What If comics. I was huge into What If.
Ooh, yeah.
Only because I love like the world building. I love how they ask these questions. There was also a comic, I think it was in the 90s, called Amalgam, which was like DC and Marvel came together and made like new heroes. And there was one where they mashed up Wolverine and Batman and called them the Dark Claw. Dude. And then Storm and Wonder Woman was mashed up. But I've always loved, like, you know, anytime either Marvel or Amalgam like mixed up characters in comic books, I was just like, how are they gonna do this, where are they gonna go? And some were more successful than others. So with Rebuild the Galaxy, it felt like a what if, you know? And I absolutely was in, I loved it. And they were just like, we want you to be Jar Jar. And I was like, okay, I'm down. As long as I get to say crazy things. And they were like, yeah, say whatever you want. And so I just started saying some outlandish stuff, like, you know, especially like, I'm the Phantom Menace. I was always the Phantom Menace, right? And I was like, that's never gonna make it into the show. And it's there, it's in the show. I was just crazy. But that show is just so much fun because, again, it's like a side quest that leads you to a whole bunch of new people that you get to fall in love with, you know? Who knew that nerf herders would be like something that we all wanted to see? You know?
Amen.
Who's scruffy looking?
We have some fan questions. I'm gonna get to these. Harry, aka Zombie Youngling, and Danielle, where are you folks at? Raise your hands. Right over here? There you are. They would like to know, how did you get cast as Jar Jar? Let's go back to the Phantom Menace. How did that come about?
Okay, I'm gonna make a very, very long story kind of short. So I was in a show called Stomp, which was found object, percussion, and...
I know we got some fans in here. Them shows are sold out everywhere they go.
Yeah, I was in the show called Stomp in the 90s, and I was 20-something. And we were in San Francisco on tour, at the Golden Gate Theater on tour. And I was the lead of the show. But one night, one of the people who was in the show like a year before me, who had like a bit of seniority, he was from San Francisco. And so he flew in from New York and was just like, yeah, I'm gonna lead the show tonight, and Ahmed, you're gonna play this other role. And I had not played that role in like 8 months. And I was just like, I don't wanna play this other role. This is my show, my cast, we all know each other. We had just done like the Vietnam of road shows, which was like every city, 2 weeks every night we were in a new city. And it was one of those things where you just like, you wake up and you don't remember where you are.
Oh my God.
You know what I'm saying? So it was like, thank you, Cleveland. We're in Detroit. Thank you, Detroit. You know? But we finally got to San Francisco where we could just like chill. And then this guy shows up and he's like, I'm opening San Francisco. And I was like, okay. And at 22, I was just slightly,
Arrogant?
yeah, just that what you said. I was slightly arrogant at 22. And I was like, I'm going to make sure that no one in the audience ever sees you exist. And I took that show over. Like, it was bad, it was really bad. So I'm a drummer, right? And the guy who like took my night was not. And so there's this part in Stomp called Suspension where we're like hanging 40 feet in the air and we're playing on this stuff, like playing drums. And I counted it off like really fast. And everybody in the cast always knew when I was on one. They was just like, oh, here he goes. You know, I was on Juan that night. And I played this thing, I was playing with like one hand, I was like, and I'm looking over at him going, yeah, keep up with this one, right? And then, then there's a number called Encore, right? And I'm telling you, this was so ridiculous. I had like a group of groupies in the audience, and there's like all of these young girls. And it's Stomp, you're not really supposed to play to the audience like that. I was ham and cheese. I was just like playing right to them. And so in Encore, you know, I'm like looking at them and stuff, and then I take my shirt off and I throw it in the crowd like I'm Mick Jagger, right? Ridiculous. And I was like, yeah, you. I was just pointing girls out. I was like, yeah, you, and you, right? And so I get off stage and then I start feeling bad because I just took over the show and there's 8 people in the show. And everybody was just like, oh, Ahmed, you're a freaking thing, right? Then my boy RJ was just like, hey man, I had a guest in the audience and she's the casting director for Lucasfilm. And I was like, oh, no. And I thought I messed up RJ's shot.
Oh man.
I was like, oh man. Like he invited her, Robin Gerland. And I was like, oh, RJ, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, man. I just ruined your whole situation. He was like, no, she wants to talk to you. And I was like, word? After that show? He was like, yeah. Go back, this was before cell phones, children. We used to have these things called landlines, young men. And you used to have to like go to a physical location and wait. There was like no voicemail, nothing that popped up with a number on it. It was just a guess. If you think about it, landlines were quite ridiculous, right? Because you don't know who's calling. It could be anybody. It just ring, and we just picked it up like crazy people. Now we don't even answer phones. We're just like, yeah, no, telemarketer. Before you're just like, so what are you selling? So I had to go get the landline. He was like, wait at the crib for the landline. And she was like, I was like, I bet. So I walked uphill, which San Francisco has a lot of them, to the crib, waited for the phone call. And I picked up the phone and it was Robin Gerland. And she was like, she said these words to me like I was supposed to think that they were like rational. I want you to come to Skywalker Ranch and audition for this show. And I was like, what words are you saying? That does not, are you what is this? And so I drive, and this is dumb. You know, A New Hope was the first movie I ever saw, ever, in the theater.
Wow.
Ever. Yeah. And now someone is on this ridiculous phone telling me that I have to drive to Skywalker Ranch. So I drive to Skywalker Ranch, and Skywalker Ranch, for those who haven't been there, has this like booth right in front of, they have their own like fire brigade with like fire engines and shit. They got their own fire engines, like just for Skywalker Ranch. So there's a booth and there's a firefighter, a Skywalker Ranch firefighter in this booth, right? And so I drive up and he's like, hello, Mr. Best. We know you're going to the main house, right? And for some reason, I got hyper-focused on, they have the fireman's patch, and it's an X-Wing fighter.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. I'm getting one of them patches. Before I get out of here, if I gotta rip it off you, Skywalker fireman, I'm getting one of them joints. And so I go up to the main house and Robin is like, okay, I can't tell you what this is for. I can't give you a script and I can't give you any explanations.
You in?
Audition. And I was like, all right. And you know, apparently she liked it because I'm like 2 weeks later, I get called for a screen test at Industrial Lights and Magic, which was crazy.
The end.
That was the beginning of the crazy shit. Hell yeah, I got the patch. I'm from New York. I'm leaving with something, as Denzel said. I'm from around the way.
Oh my gosh. That story is incredible. Sir, you are a pioneer. You know that?
That's what they say.
You, sir, are the first fully formed CGI character to use motion capture for Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah.
And motion capture, I was looking up on it for this panel. It started in like the early to mid 90s, but it wasn't very prevalent. I even talked to Andy Serkis when he did King Kong in 2003, and that was when like, you know, it was really starting to take off, and Andy was also a pioneer. You did it before Andy.
I did,
Andy's a godfather of it. But talk to us about that experience, because this is being used for the first time to create a full CGI character, and there's probably a massive learning curve. So what was that experience like using this technology for the first time?
Yeah, well, this is kind of the continuation of the audition story. So my screen test was motion capture. And so I go to ILM. This was crazy. So I go to ILM. I still don't know what's going on. They still don't give me a script. They don't give me a character name. They don't give me anything to go on, right? They tell me to go into this room and they pull out this cat suit with a whole bunch of ping pong balls on it, right? And they go, put this on. I'm like, are we about to get weird up in here? Like, what's going on here? Put this on. And then they gave me, no bullshit, like 6-inch platform shoes, right? So I was either gonna audition as a space alien or go down to the Castro and make some money. I know which one it was gonna be. I couldn't figure it out. So they like, put this on. I go down there and I put the joint on. I don't know what's happening. Now, motion capture and performance capture is very well known. And they have these things called, these camera arrays that capture 3D images. They're really good. Like I just directed a video game with a whole bunch of performance capture. And looking around the room, I was just like, this has come a long way. Because when I auditioned at my screen test, not only was I wearing this like revealing catsuit with the ping pong balls, but they had the infrared cameras on like regular ass tripods around the room. And the room was like a garage. It was like a big like warehouse garage with a roll up, door and everything. So I'm standing around looking at these rooms, and then what we can now fit on an iPhone was like a thick computers. You don't really think about computers as being like girthy, but these computers were just 3 feet in girth. They were just thick, trying to capture like a megabyte, right? So I'm standing around, it's like standing in volume, and I'm a little embarrassed, but I'm like, whatever, I'm trying to get a job, bruv. And then they were just like, okay, just wait here until George comes in. And I was like, George who? Nobody told me George was coming, because Robin was the one who did my first audition. I thought I was just gonna be doing some stuff with a bunch of the text, and then George was gonna watch it. And he was like, no, he's coming. And this is the first time I met George Lucas, right?
You didn't imagine meeting him for the first time in that getup.
I'm wearing a suit where I look like Michelle Pfeiffer in Catwoman. And I'm meeting the director of the movie that, the 3 movies that formed me as a young person. You know what I'm saying? It's like my hero. So I'm standing in the middle of this empty garage with a whole bunch of cameras and thick ass computers, and George Lucas walks in. And I have to tell you, even to this day, George Lucas has hair like you wouldn't imagine. It's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. He should donate his hair to science. It doesn't move with him. He moves, then the hair moves. It's phenomenal. It's beautiful. He can style it in any way. He shakes his hair. It's like looking at Farrah Fawcett. So he walked in with the hair, and he's really unassuming. And he was like, hey, how you doing? And I was like, hey, Mr. Lucas, it's so great. I'm excited to be here. And he goes, yeah, I can see that. And I was like, oh shit.
Get out of
and then he was just like, okay, cool. Walk. And I was like, walk? And he was like, yeah, walk. Just walk a couple of times through the volume. So I'm walking in these like 6-inch heels, and he's just like, nice. Now can you like do it a little loping and like longer arms? And I'm like, yeah, okay. And I do that. And then he goes, do whatever you want. And then I was just like, you ain't said nothing but a word. And so I started doing like backflips and stuff. I was doing this martial art at the time called capoeira. So I did a lot of capoeira in the room. And then he was just like, okay, great. And leaves. And he just leaves. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess that was cool. And then the animators go like this. They go, come over here. And I go behind this monitor, and I see what we now call a point cloud. But it was all of the dots, the sensors that the infrared captured, and it moved like me. Like it looked like me. Even though there was no character or image around the skeletal frame, I was like, that's me. Like you really couldn't really deny it, you know?
Yeah.
And the animators looked at me and they were like, this is gonna work. This is gonna work. And I was just blown away by it. And that's how I knew the world was different. You know, movies were different from that moment.
Y'all better clap for that. We're looking at the pioneer of motion capture, which Andy Serkis only calls performance capture.
Yeah, PCAP, performance capture.
PCAP.
Yeah, and then, you know, Andy is really like the best of the business. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's really developed it into the performance capture that it is now. I mean, I might have been the first, but he's definitely the one who shaped performance capture, because not necessarily because of the volume of work, because he has a lot of volume, but he actually fought for it to be called performance capture. You know, he tells this really good story about when he was doing Planet of the Apes, and you know, he was doing all of like the Caesar moves and the grunts, and there was someone on set who was just like, who just kept calling him like the actor, and he's doing the noises. And then they would say, can we do one without the noises? And Andy stopped everybody. He was just like, I'm not the actor, I am Andy. And these aren't noises, this is the character.
Wow.
So you have to respect the character. And he really fought for this work to be recognized the way it is. And you know, the software that we developed during The Phantom Menace is still being used today. Still being used. Like, so every single CGI character has a little bit of me in there, you know, including Gollum, including Caesar, including King Kong, including Thanos, you know. This thing is really a way of performing. It is an acting method, which is why performance capture really does capture what it is.
Amen. It needs to be an Oscar category. Amen. Y'all agree? This is one of my favorite panels ever, folks. Natalia wants to know, did you have a choice in picking your lightsaber?
I did, yes. Both in Jedi Temple Challenge and on The Mandalorian. I really wanted to do the double lightsaber stuff because, and I've said this before, Kelleran Beq, I wanted to bring a different kind of weapons art to Star Wars. And I do a lot of weapons arts, but one of my favorites is this Filipino martial art called Eskrima. And I've been an Escrimador for a while. I teach Eskrima as well. And you don't really see Filipino martial arts represented in a lot of martial arts movies, even though Filipino martial arts has influenced every martial arts movie from Bruce Lee.
Wow.
Right? You know, Bruce Lee and Danny Inosanto developed Jeet Kune Do. Bruce Lee first came up with Jeet Kune Do as his interpretation of a Chinese martial art called Wing Chun, right? And Bruce Lee really pioneered Jeet Kune Do, which means, you know, Kyun means fist, Do means way, Jeet means like either finding or intercepting, right? So Bruce Lee came up with Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, is what is the Cantonese way, right? In Mandarin, it's Jushun Dao, right? It's different. But Jeet Kune Do really found its way when Bruce Lee found Danny Inosanto, because Danny Inosanto was very much a Filipino martial arts. He started with Japanese Kempo, right? But because he's from the Philippines, you know, he does this martial art in the Philippines called Kali, right? And so all of the Jeet Kune Do stick stuff, weapon stuff, the Kali stuff is really Danny Inosanto.
Okay.
So when it comes to like, when you see things like John Wick, right? And you see all like the gun disarms and all the close quarter stuff.
Yeah.
That's, a lot of that is Kali, right? A lot of that is Kali influenced,
Yep.
you know? But nobody really says anything, you know, like nobody really talks about it because it's been really just kind of blended into this idea of martial arts or mixed martial arts, right? Just like a lot of MMA is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but now it's just MMA, right? So I wanted to make a point that Eskrima is a blade art, right? And can be used in a bunch of different contexts. And it looks different than, say, like, you know, a lot of the Japanese arts that are in Star Wars. Like most of the sword fighting in Star Wars is Japanese based, right? Rightfully so, because Star Wars is very much influenced by Akira Kurosawa, right?
Right.
And you know, shows movies like Seven Samurai, movies like Hidden Fortress. But, and then we've seen a lot of like the wushu Chinese martial arts in movies, right? And
Right.
that's Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung and you know, Donnie Yen and all those guys. They all went to the same school in China. But, you know, a lot of the Southern Asian martial arts, a lot of like the Kali, the Eskrima, the Arnis, the Silat, they all have been talked about, but no one has ever said anything. And they haven't really been deep in Star Wars. So I really wanted to make sure that Kelleran Beq did Eskrima, right? And I wanted to make sure that everyone knew, like that's where the sabered hand comes from. The sabered hand comes from Eskrima, which is like, you know, your stick is your knife, is your sword, is your hand. So in Eskrima, they say that your hand should be bladed. You should have a bladed hand, as if you're carrying a knife in your other hand. And you know, for Kelleran Beq, I was like, your hand should be your saber. It doesn't really matter whether or not you're holding a lightsaber or your empty hand. It's the same technique. And eventually I want to be able to show some like sabered hand stuff.
I love it. I appreciate, and I think I speak for all of us when I say, we appreciate the thought process.
Yeah.
It's not just you showing up. You're taking it seriously, you're passionate about being a part of it, and you're putting in the work, and it means the world to hear you just kind of building this.
Yeah, well, George did. You know, like every conversation I've ever had with George has never been surface. There have always been layers upon layers upon layers of what this thing is. Like I recently had a conversation with him about the Force, right? Because I think what we really, there are a couple of things that I think that we're needing as not just people in the movies, but as fans, right? And one of them is having this idea of the Force permeating through every story, you know? And that definitely was a thing in the past. And sometimes I think we lose sight of it. And you don't necessarily have to use the Force to have it flow through you and have it flow through your story.
Right.
And, you know, I was asking George, like, what is this Force, you know? And where does it come from, and why should we believe in it, right? Because everyone kind of believes in the Force,
right,
when you think about it, you know? And the hardest part about Star Wars, and this is why I don't judge Star Wars fans, I don't judge Star Wars fans because when you make stories really, really well, everyone takes them personally. And Star Wars wasn't created for a mass of people to think the same way. Star Wars was created so every individual has ownership over it, right? We all take our Star Wars personally, and we find a character in Star Wars that's like us, right? And we identify with that character, so much so that we cosplay that character, we buy their figures, we learn their histories. Like, we want to know about all of these people that we are connected with, right? And that connection brings us all together. It brings us all into rooms like this. It all makes us feel good, right? It all makes us feel like we are pointing our affections and an affinity towards a specific direction, right?
Yep.
And that direction is the love of this story. That direction is the love of all of us, right? That's what the Force is. The Force is that love. The Force is that connection. The Force is that community. The Force is that person who goes, that's a Star Wars fan, I'm sticking up for that Star Wars fan, right? That Force is, you're not alone. You are not alone. You can find your tribe. You can find your people. You can find the people that see things your way or don't. But we're all connected through this one thing. That's the Force. And that's what we have to start talking about. We have to start giving to that Force, right? And we have to stop thinking that it's the light side good, the dark side bad, right?
Right.
There is no dark side good, right?
Right.
The light and the dark are both good. And then there's the bad, right? This is the conversation that I had with George, right?
Right.
Balance in the Force, right, isn't the dark side and the light side. Balance is balance, and then there's corruption, right? I usually say, like, when you talk about the yin and yang, right, in Chinese philosophy, light and dark aren't interpreted as bad and good. It's cold and hot, right? And usually what I say is you don't judge your stove by your refrigerator's ideas. Woo! Right? You need both of them in order to make good food. So you're not judging the cold side or the hot side, right? But when it's outside of the balance, your food gets rotten. And that's what we have to talk about.
Yeah.
Love can bring us together.
Right.
But false love can corrupt us, right? False love can keep us in an abusive relationship. False love can make us follow the wrong person, right?
Right.
That's the dark side. The dark side is out of balance. The dark side is that false sense of love, right? The dark side is that manipulative sense of love.
Wow.
You know, when you are in balance, the hot and the cold of love exists, right?
Right.
When we meet Han Solo, he's not that great of a dude. You know what I'm saying?
The scoundrel.
Shoots Greedo right there in the bar, right? He shoots Greedo. Let's not talk about the other way around, right? He shoots Greedo, right there in the bar.
Yep.
He tells Luke, this Force thing, that don't mean nothing when you get a blaster like straight to your face, right?
Right.
But then he goes, okay, Luke, may the Force be with you. Starts to believe, starts to change, right? When he starts to change, that's when he finds love, Princess Leia, right? That's when he sacrifices himself.
Bro.
I love you. I know. Carbonite, right? Changes. That's balance, yeah? That's what this Force thing is all about. And that's what has to permeate through every story.
For more insight on the Force, join Ahmed Beq's class over at Stanford University. This has been
Thank you, brother.
absolutely one of my favorite panels of all time. Thank you so much for being here. All I want to say is you're an incredible person. You've put so much work and effort into everything you do. We appreciate all of that, and we're thrilled to see your legacy continuing, brother.
Thank you, my brother. I appreciate you.
San Antonio, make the room!
Thank you, brother.